Chapter 1. Your self-listening. We listen to many things in our daily activities. Some of these things, for example, the media is known as our source of information. But at the same time, if it is not handled properly, it is inevitable that it will cause a crisis. The media is the cause of the crisis. It is not only because they do not expect to present a report that is suitable for all society, but because they have lost a rational audience. There is no body in this world that does not have its own side. Untrained, it cannot be identified. There is no reporter who can. I don't have a problem with that because it's obvious that people are used to wanting something of their own. However, because of our habits, what we did should not be harmful to others. However, we can prevent it. When we answer the question of how to say it, for example, just as a person has the right to choose the food that suits him, he also has the right to listen to what he chooses, read what he chooses, and watch what he chooses. To do this, the first thing that needs to be done is to listen to you. A person should only receive orders from himself. Listening to yourself begins when we begin to identify your own needs. When we look at the sources of information in our house, it is known that we do not take into ourselves all the things that the machine has brought. We should also develop the ability to distinguish the sounds around us. Let me share some of the understanding that he felt as a child, and what was broadcast on the radio and in the newspaper was treated as if it was not completely false. I believe it was the same recently. But such an understanding is not appropriate. They may lie for two reasons. The first reason is that they believe that the information they provide is for their personal benefit. And if you think the second one is going to benefit your so-called own side, you'd be lying. It is only our instincts that do not lie to us. Instinct has the ability to infer things beyond knowledge. What I read in a small book written by Amari Mammal called One Time Study Z: when we are faced with uncertain answer choices in an exam, if we choose the first answer choice word that came to our mind, we will be right, and if we delete it and choose another, we will be wrong. The tool that conveys that message to our mind beforehand is called instinct. This means that it is extremely important to listen to our inner evidence that we have not understood anything about the subject. If not, we will be victims of reports that are not balanced and that some party presents to protect its own interests or achieve the needs of its own side. We follow this instinct only when we find no compelling reason for what we hear. If we have knowledge about what we hear, we must support it with information whether we accept or reject that information. This applies directly to the information we receive from an external party, and based on our internal verification, we can decide to accept or reject that information. But the things that are decided only by our conscience, and if it is found necessary to compare information, the one who compares must come from within us, that is, after comparing us with being positive and negative or having no feelings about the issue, we will take the one that is better inside us. The information that people give us is based on their own understanding and needs. If you don't stop where they stand, it is difficult to understand them. We should also accept information based on our own understanding and persuasive reasons. Otherwise, we can fill our database with useless things. When our database is filled with nonsense, we lose the space to receive something meaningful and useful when it comes our way. Because it is not possible to put something sweet and not sweet in a pot at the same time, in order to put something sweet, it is necessary to sweeten the thing that is not sweet, otherwise it is necessary to remove it. If not, we will allow everything to continue as it is. It also has its disadvantages. Firstly, if our memory is filled with useful things, it may not be a problem. But if it is already packed with useless information, it needs to be cleaned and replaced with something useful. Doing that won't be easy either. So we have to check it first. Anyone can express their support in any way they want. For example, it's been 10 years since I stopped reading novels and watching action movies. That's not to say that I don't think both are good. But mostly because I wanted to keep a line that was closer to what he wanted to do. It is believed that reading fiction is what makes people more habituated to reading. After that, it is possible to gradually enter the choice of books. A person cannot be all things at the same time, so he should choose his own things and separate them. For that, he needs to choose and use what paves the way for him. To do so, it is important to listen to yourself first. A person needs to choose the path that allows him to get input for what he wants to be by leaving the external chaos behind. That input comes first from you. Following our inner selves without influence can lead to good results. We don't need other people to tell us what to do. We also need to listen to ourselves before deciding. We can receive different information about the same thing from inside and outside at the same time. If we don't get enough confirmation about what we hear from outside, we have to accept and deal with the voice that we hear from inside. Following that voice will lead us to our goals. As long as a person lives for a purpose, there is no other choice than to listen to yourself to achieve the purpose. The first step to identifying what is important is to listen to yourself. No one can identify the main path without being able to listen to himself. Therefore, there is nothing like listening to ourselves before repeating what we have heard and seen from people. Therefore, self-listening is not always a time-consuming task. Especially when we think about our future, the priority should be about the information we get from ourselves. Of course, it is undeniable that there are people who can benefit us based on their experience based on our situation. However, they can tell us that we can do something serious in general, but they can't tell us that we can separate our ways. If we listen to our inner self, it can tell us the right path. This is what we call our inner feeling. He can tell us about things that we have never seen or heard from the ground. Second, using something we have seen or heard at some point as a model, you may have made something similar to it according to your own needs. We can say that I wish I had something like that, or I want to have something like that in the future. What we saw in the first is called discovering something that was not there, and what we saw in the second is called recovering something that was there. In general, we cannot say that both are non-existent things. Because there is nothing that did not exist before, but our matter of getting and not getting, we can find things sooner or later. However, the time we find things does not mean that they did not exist before. Instead, we should know that no one can find something that was not there before. It doesn't mean that something that we didn't discover was something that didn't exist, but something that no one used before we used it. Recover means something that was in service at some point and was not used when we found it. But both of them existed. The difference is that they are things that have been used and those that have not been used. When we buy a computer, we buy it empty, but after we buy it, we install various apps needed for it. After installing the apps, we start the computer. This means that the computer and the things needed for the computer were in different places, not something where one was present and the other was not. Knowledge is the same. When people were created, they were not created with anything, wealth, knowledge, and nothing was created with them. But after they are created, they take knowledge and habits from other places. The fact that humans were not created with anything since they were created does not mean that important things were created after they were created. But it means that people and things needed by people were in different places. The hard work for human beings is not to find things that did not exist and bring them to themselves, but to make the things that were their own. The biggest tool to achieve that at the right time and place is first and foremost to listen to yourself. Starting from listening to yourself does not completely save us from repetition, but it helps us to distinguish our own things from the repetition. Repetition is something that most people do on a regular basis, and it is an activity that most people use as a department of their lives. It also helps us to use something that has been there and that no one has used before us. Even science says that everything that is seen comes from something that is not seen. Our not seeing something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. What is our conscience? Before answering the question of what our conscience is, it is appropriate to see what conscience itself is. Conscience is our identity that gives us an order to do good things without any external pressure. This means that it is not based on circumstances, but it is important to realize that it is our inner power that lives with us in any time and situation and records the things that we have named as good or not good in our life principle and prevents us from doing the thing that we have said is bad and pushes us to do what we have said is good. We are somewhat blind to the function and nature of our conscience. We are bound to ask where the things that we have classified as bad or good come from. It is not something that was born with us, but it is our identity that we have developed based on the habits that we have received from our predecessors. In the same way, just as there is no common good culture in the world, there is no common bad culture. But this depends on the circumstances. For example, when humans were created and started living on Earth, there was no such thing as clothes. We are the result of our habits. Later, people created and started using clothes through their own practice. However, they all started using clothes that suited them according to their actual temperament. Based on this, they continued to prepare clothes from leaves and skins until modern Sufi, and even today, they have not decided on one type of clothing. Everyone benefits from increasing their own selection. Among these processes, following different choices grew into something called culture and custom. Based on this, it became the reason for the creation of different clothing systems according to the area. This style of clothing is recognized from half body to full body covering. After that, the shame of humanity passed away, and even those who urinate only on the body were created. As this habit grew, people living in the same area started to use the same clothes, and it started to be considered as a culture. After that, using the style of clothing as one's own identity became one of the main things, and it became normal among the people of the world. However, these communities who practiced the same things and came to do their own culture came to agree not to follow others' things that are not similar to them and not to do their own. Not only did they do that, but they began to consider their unseemly attire inappropriate and unseemly. This dress system that was not accepted by the community was considered as bad, and the community agreed that it was good because of the custom and it was accepted. However, he could not limit the desire of others. However, it is important to know that there is no good or bad culture created with us, but all are the result of our practice. This is called conscience. After we have recorded the things that we have called our own good things or our own bad things in different ways, it encourages us to do what we have said is good to do, and it is our tool to prevent us from doing what we have said is bad. Following this, if we look at whether we have a common conscience or not, we do not have a common conscience, but our conscience is formed based on our habits. People who live in the same environment develop the same culture and tradition, so they may have the same understanding without thinking. Their consciousness is shaped by their culture and tradition. If a child grows up hearing that something is said to be good from childhood, it means that his conscience will accept that and record it as good. Similarly, if he grows up hearing something that is said to be bad, his conscience will register that thing as bad. Next, it means that he decides to do what he says is good and what he says is bad, and not to do what he says. Therefore, it is our habit that guides our conscience, not our conscience that guides our habit. What is our fixed position? By saying this, I want the reader to understand that it is not related to exercise. We have a lot to say about our fixed position. Our fixed position is our point of view. Our fixed position is our support. Our fixed position is our decision. Our correct posture is the guide of our conscience. If our conscience makes a decision based on our habits, then our adjusted position will be found from our habits. We cannot pass a decision that is adjusted at the time of decision if our position is adjusted by our habit. Above, it has been tried to show that our consciousness is shaped by our habits. It is through our practice that we get our adjusted position. If our practice is limited to a certain area, our position may be limited in the same way. In our practice, we have a wider environment. Culture, habit, attitude, there we will find our position adjusted based on needs. This so-called balanced position includes, to some extent, reaching a position that allows you to maintain the balance of things, and not an identity limited only by your group's needs and your own needs. Although man does not have the knowledge and ability to understand the individual needs of all people, he has been able to identify things that are important to all human beings. Our fixed position leads us to that, but does not limit us to protect our own and our group's interests. A well-dressed person is not motivated to do things that harm other people. Because even in size, he knows what is mutually beneficial and mutually harmful for human beings. For example, water is good for all mankind and atomic bomb is harmful for all mankind. This situation does not differ according to the location of the land, culture and customs, but applies equally to all. Our correct position is at least this kind of understanding that enables us to make appropriate decisions by distinguishing things that are considered beneficial and harmful to all human beings according to their level and importance. There is only one thing we need to develop our well-groomed appearance. It is listening to us. When we listen to ourselves, we can be guided in the right direction. We can make our way only when we start listening to ourselves. Our inner instincts can show us the right way to practice. Therefore, listening to our inner self is our greatest tool that helps us identify and do things that are good for ourselves and humanity. The testimony of our inner conscience helps us better than the information we get from the outside to do something. There is no only bad or only good thing on this earth, everything is related. For example, we have seen that what we describe as our habits, our conscience, and our fixed position has been consumed. Everything is connected like this, nothing stands alone. Religion and belief, we often think that both are the same thing. But it is not the same at all. What we call religion is institutionalized. There are different names of religions, and all religions have the basic idea of the religion. They have a doctrine that reinforces that concept of religion. According to that doctrine, they teach the followers of the religion to rule and be governed by it. A person who is a member of that religious institution and does not follow that doctrine or the rules of that religion may be punished. Most of the ideas included in the doctrine are related to the discipline of religion. For that reason, they use as a reference the document that contains the original idea that they used for the basis of the religion. However, without twisting the idea into self-interest, we will not directly enter into an idea that does not concern us, whether all religious people use it or not. Because our purpose is to see the differences in unity of religion and belief, not to evaluate the inner workings of religions in general, a religion is a body that has its own followers and has a legal entity, regardless of its name and its own distinguishing symbol. A person may or may not be powerful and have his own faith. Another may not be a member of any religious institution but have faith. That is why people who are able to create things that can change people's lives without declaring that they are members of any religious institution are often suspected of being unbelievers. But the people are not unbelievers and are not embraced by any religious institution. But they also have faith. But faith is not only institutional as a religion, but also on an individual level, a person can develop his own faith. It may or may not have any reference other than his inner consciousness. A person develops this faith based on what he has been observing since birth, for example, based on what he has read, what he has learned and the discipline of his religion, he can develop his own faith. However, by teaching this belief to people, it is possible to generate supporters and followers, but it is not capable of being like a religious institution. Faith cannot be embraced under a band of things. Faith is mostly based on knowledge and personal understanding, and I have no rival in its strength. Because faith is what people stand on different analysis and take their position, not based on any external binding situation. Faith is not the kind that is often easily eroded. Because faith is related to morals and personal dignity, faith is not something that people follow en masse, but it is something that can be reflected in the life of each individual. One of the things that make faith different from religion is that people can change their religion. But they cannot change their faith. No matter where a person goes, his faith goes with him, not something that changes based on his religion. For example, it is not difficult to find a person who is not a member of any religious institution, but believes that stealing is good, lying is not good, sharing food is good, and loving is good. However, if asked, this man can tell us that he has never even reached the door of a religious institution. But the faith can be strong and full of good things. In the same way, it is not difficult to find people who do not hate lying, stealing, and hatred, even if they attend their church at least one day a week. But these people are not without religion, but because they lack faith. Often, people like to exclude and belittle people who are not their own party for various reasons. Those who are known for doing this are those who are more religious than other people and seem to be religious fanatics. But the person who stands firm in his belief is mine, and I have no special place for the person who says it. His position is measured based on the actual circumstances. He uses his own feelings and conscience to maintain the balance of these objective feelings, and he does not try to convince them about something. People who have developed their personal beliefs well use their beliefs as the most important part of their lives. For example, they can support this belief with logic. This principle is not written on a document, but it is imprinted in the mind. This principle includes doing everything that is good to do and not doing everything that you believe is not good. These people can sometimes be considered stubborn in doing this. However, they do not waver from their position. Even so, there may or may not be a place where a religious ceremony is performed. Their loyalty and love is unmatched. Because they are not based on pretending and other people's needs, they do not give much space to necessary pressures. They look at situations from the perspective of their own personal beliefs and not from the perspective of external pressure. If by some chance they meet someone who matches their own life principle, they communicate easily, but they do not have much difficulty in attracting people or attracting people to themselves. When asked, they don't hesitate to share what they know. Either way, the listener doesn't care if I accept it or not. They don't like to be in crowded places. However, if there is someone who benefits from being there, they will not hesitate to participate. They often don't want to talk about what they hate. They like to forget what they hate. They don't want to lose their power by thinking about it. They only like to dwell on the present. They don't want to think and worry about the past or the future. It is not their nature to repeatedly point out human weakness due to judgment. If they can, they will show others by doing what they believe is good. If they are not in a position to do that, they don't add themselves to a particular tumult in order to fit in with the masses. Such people are more or less present in every society. This situation is not based on learning and not learning. It is a characteristic of their personal beliefs that they have achieved through their choices. This can be called their choice. Every man is what he is now because of his choice. Developing a positive or negative attitude is a personal choice, not forced by anyone. Therefore, a child who grows up feeding his mind with good things from the beginning will find it difficult to bring inappropriate things to him. Even if I wanted to, he would have to remove what was there first. Above all, it is not good to be empty. Because an empty mind cannot be rational, he accepts what came before. Your personal opinion building. It is never too late for anyone to become a good self-builder. We all want to have good body fat, but not all of us can achieve it. Because when we listen to others and follow others, we don't give ourselves enough time to find something of our own. I can start from anywhere. A person can become the owner of a good fatness when he first begins to be himself. Being a good husband and wife does not make us different from other people, but it allows us to live as ourselves when we live with other people. Most of the time people can get knowledge from school in different ways. Good character cannot be acquired from school. Because the duration of school is limited, but our fat is always with us. A person can forget what he learned in college at some point. Your kindness is not forgotten in any place and situation. Our good character can be built in terms of our profession. It may be based on the nature of the environment we live in. It may be in terms of the following religion. Our integrity should be based not only on our outer self, but also on our inner self. Building a good character should be something that we use as an identity, and everyone around us will help us. If the people around us notice our fatness and know us, it is good for us. For example, if our friends want to do something, they won't invite us to do it if they find out that it doesn't go with our personality. This means that our fatness is closely related to our strength. Building a good character is a way of life that is defined by cleanliness of clothing, diet, speech, lifestyle, and our relationship with people. This may not be based on circumstances, but rather our identity that lives with us permanently. A person who is fat and well-educated does not look at things only from the point of view of their direct benefits. For example, it is known that we eat food for our stomach. Our stomach is also connected with our health. We can eat food wherever we want, but even the place where we eat food should suit our personal taste. Because the measure of what is called fat is beyond the stomach, when we do something that is not in line with our personality, we must be judged inside. If we find ourselves in a place that doesn't suit us, we should be uncomfortable. Because a person is fat and scanned with his inner self, it cannot be separated from him at any time and place. Sometimes when we look at your personal situation, it is related to doing quality things, using quality things, giving quality things, buying quality things. For example, a person who is distinguished by his personal fatness wants something that resembles him in every way, but cannot find satisfaction in doing something that does not match his fatness in any way. Sometimes we can consider this situation as giving yourself the status you deserve. If people can live the life they choose, who will stop us from choosing to live a healthy and well-built life? No one. The decision is in our hands. If we choose ordinary things, we will have ordinary things. But our choice cannot be based on our current situation and our past or future situation. Therefore, the issue of weight and construction is improving every time. Because a person's condition does not last forever until he is nailed to the earth of life. However, it is not the kind that changes every day and every hour. It is also important to be progressive with the situation. Since there is nothing left standing, it is inevitable that there will be occasions when our behavior needs to be flexible with the things that have changed. Therefore, just as there is no permanent person, there cannot be a permanent identity. This means that it is necessary to do what our current situation requires. We need to be careful not to become rigid and difficult for people in our behavior related to our personality. This means that we can have good fat while doing what the situation allows. This can only happen as long as we do not want to remain heirs to fixed habits. People develop fixed habits to avoid adapting to changing things. Circumstances are not always the same but changeable. Therefore, people should prepare themselves not in terms of their past, but in terms of their present. As yesterday's past is past, today's past is inevitable, so it is necessary to accept it. People's lives are disturbed because of their efforts to picture others. Everyone can live in harmony with himself as he sees fit. In order to be in harmony with them, people must stop following the external noise and follow their inner guidance. If they can do this, it will not be difficult for them to accept themselves. Chapter 2. You look for it, get it. This topic may seem a little different from the articles on the topic that you are familiar with. Even if I think yes, it is not wrong. We can say where we want ourselves, what we want is within ourselves. In the previous article, we have seen the idea that everything comes from ourselves, nothing is yet to be created, everything is already prepared and waiting for us without our creation. Still, the idea has not changed as it was already prepared. We need to find ourselves first in order to find what is already prepared for him. Ourself is like knowing the world for which we were created, but we know that we have been given a name and taken care of since we were born. But to find the hidden potential within us, it takes a hard search. Instead of looking for it, it is necessary to distinguish what we are, where we are, whether the place we are in is ours or not. After we are able to distinguish it through our soul, if the place we are in is ours, we will continue with it, and if there are things that can be improved, we can continue by improving where we are. The place we are in is not ours, but if we are having trouble carrying the rest of the people's wealth, it means that we will sit down and continue to search for what is ours. The way we can identify this first is simple. Our inner self tells us that. If we have, for example, in the place where we are, if we can get inner satisfaction beyond money and material, believe me, it is our own domain. But getting the money we need, driving the car we need, living in the house we need. If we are far from inner peace and contentment, our place is not there. Therefore, it is necessary to quickly return the place to the owner. And then we need to prepare ourselves to meet our own destiny waiting for us somewhere. Self-discovery can be educational preparation, it may be taking different trainings, it could be reading books, it could be visiting workshops. Of all these we do not lose anything that goes with our innermost desires. All these listed above do not mean that they will be our choice, but they are our pointers to reach our choice. A person can identify what makes them comfortable while doing it. A person can also identify when I start to feel uncomfortable. This happens in search. When we do this task, our inner desire is our guide. If we listen with understanding, it is only our inner self that will tell us what will happen and what will not happen. Animals are as noble creatures as humans and can identify the place that suits them by being guided by their instincts. As a child, I would like to share with you one thing that you heard from your grandmother. It is said that in the days when people were not abundant like today, people followed the behavior of their cattle to occupy or settle their own land. They also choose the direction they want, get up early in the morning, drive their cattle and spend the night in the evening. When they get up the next day, if their cattle leave ahead of them and show a desire to go, they continue their journey. But if those cattle show interest in staying there, they will continue to spend the night there again. The next night, if the needs of the cattle are the same, he will build a stable for the cattle there without hesitation and decide to stay there. It means that they will strengthen the settlement after capturing the landleader who avenges them for themselves. They will make that place their own for ages. This situation is not based on any kind of human abuse, but based on pure inner guidance. That was how people used to distinguish their own place. Even today, there is nothing to do with our lack of training in trying to identify our own instincts. No one can be free from this condition because it is a divine system that is beyond civilization. Because everything is done by internal confirmation and not by external pressure. The idea of finding yourself is also well connected with this in our time. We will find ourselves through this. It does not mean that we will bring to ourselves what we have heard in history, but it means that we will follow the approach that is suitable for our time. For example, if we are employed and teach in a school, our inner instinct will tell us whether the place is ours or not. Beyond that, we can distinguish in different ways, which we can tell by the results of our students. We can tell by the satisfaction we get from the work we do. We can tell by our acceptance with the people we work with. We can differentiate well by the feedback we get from our students in different forms. Even if the salary we get now is not enough, if the place is really ours, we will find everything we need in that line. But if it proves that the line is not ours, it will be up to us to decide whether to stay there looking for a line of ours or leave it and look for something of our own. For example, if you only want to stay there for job security, it is not recommended. It's good if it helps us to reach what we want within the time limit. It is recommended to stay there while hoping for the day when our new dream will come true. But the duration of our stay should be known by contract. If not, one day I'll do that, one day I'll change, one day I'll change, one day I don't know. What we can find ourselves is not by being confined to a certain place, but by continuing to move left and right even where we are. In doing so, we need to make our necessary preparations. The term necessary preparation is defined in many ways. Moral preparation, educational preparation, professional preparation, and economic preparation are required. Economic preparation does not mean that we need to have a lot of money to look for ourselves, but it means that we need to prepare a source of finance to meet the basic needs. That doesn't mean that the source of finance to start our own path will always be in our pocket, but it means that it is necessary to explore where the source is. For example, if our idea is trusted by an investor, we can get a loan for the money we need without any material collateral. Or our request to work together may be accepted unconditionally. It is not difficult for a person who has searched for him to find money. A person who does not find himself, even if he gets money first, he will destroy himself, not do something useless. Because the need for money seems to buy everything. There are many things that are amazing but money can't buy, but a person who finds himself knows what money can buy and what money can't buy. Therefore, his only goal is not to make a lot of money. There are many ways to make a lot of money at once. However, those methods only satisfy our thirst for money and do not help us in our efforts to earn money. It should be emphasized that we do not mean that we do not need money. It is well understood because more than enough money is necessary to live a better life. Because man has never stopped looking for better things since the day he started living by his own efforts. The book wants to remind us that no matter how much money we need, there are things that money can't buy, so we shouldn't focus only on money. Hard work, diligence, identification. There are two things that protect us in our search for money. They are either hard work or hard work. In order to identify them, it is necessary to give the proper place to the issue of finding ourselves. First of all, if we look at what we call diligence, it represents working hard, and it is a process where we get the necessary compensation for what we have done. Hard work is also related to work, but we can call it hard work when the things we do and the rewards we get are not compatible. Not only that, but the thing called hard work, working day in and day out for something without a goal, just working and living quietly, watching people and following them, without knowing who we are working for and why we are working, is just a race to make money for nothing. Diligence means that we love what we are doing with a strong spiritual awakening, and our goal is to gain wealth, but it is a work activity that gives us inner satisfaction. There is a way to separate hard work from effort. It is the result and the spiritual level. Diligence is pleasing in its results, and I am incomparable in spiritual satisfaction. Although we can earn money through hard work, we will not have inner satisfaction. In addition, when the money we earn and the energy we waste are not comparable, we can call it hard work. If hard work is just running by the body's command, It's not something that requires a lot of preparation like hard work. A hard-working person should follow the path prepared by his hard work, but there is no way to stop and waste his precious time thinking about something that should not be done. If we can distinguish between hard work and dedication in a certain way, it means that we can easily distinguish which one we forget from our goal. If we follow hard work, we have no goal to reach. If there is a goal, it is not our goal, but the person or the person who has paved the way for us. The idea of find yourself does not refer to chasing people's goals, but to setting one's own goals. Therefore, it would be good if our choice is diligence. Diligence requires attention. Diligence requires setting a goal. Diligence is a measure of what we have done. Diligence follows a scientific process. Diligence builds knowledge. We should find ourselves not in hard work but in hard work. Hard work is spending a lot of time to achieve something, but the result is the same as the other time. This is an approach that is not based on the wisdom of staying and only involves energy and time. Great things are done not by great energy but by great knowledge. So hard work requires a lot of energy, but diligence is better than knowledge. It is important to understand that this is the biggest difference. It is important to understand that it is not only energy that has changed the world, but knowledge. It is clear that this does not mean that energy is not necessary. Chapter 3. Be yourself. Many people forget themselves in order to imitate others. When a human being was created, he came to this earth with his own personal identity, but after he was born and grew up, he was able to be corrupted by many things. If we look at some of the things that have not been tampered with, fingerprints cannot be matched in any way. The people who confirmed that fingerprints do not match are for the benefit of society. It is certain that one person's fingerprint cannot match another person's fingerprint in any way. For centuries, fingerprinting has been used to prevent crime, and it continues today. But in this book, it is necessary to see not only about fingerprint mismatch, but about the whole human being's mismatch. Since the human being is fully created, no one person is similar to anyone else. People try to bring them closer to each other in order to enhance their coexistence. However, it is common to see that many people, both as individuals and as a society, put aside their own identity and try to make other people their own. If other people's culture and customs are important, there is nothing wrong with doing it yourself, but leaving or ignoring your own good things is very bad. The problem is that in the midst of trying to inherit other people's habits, you forget your own. As it is, the loss of all is the ultimate futility. A person who does not strengthen his own well in the idea that it is better for others, will by some chance not grasp well what is not his own and will be left in the air without both. For example, in the rural parts of our country, there are cultures that are considered important in all four directions. The people there still use it for payment, although not completely, because I have a reason for saying payment, which is that I remember when I was young, when I was in the country, there was a good culture called Debo where people helped each other. It is a beautiful tradition where they take turns working on each other's house or farming or helping each other. Mainly, the loan is given to someone else, but in a special case, the poor and the weak are not considered to have no money when they are living. The loan is based on the behavior of the others, but the poor are not based on that, they are helped for free. Haking weak are childless, widowed, and unable to participate in the camp due to illness. By helping them, the only thing you get in return is graduation. The answer from others is to wait and work hard, repay the loan and repay the loan, but those who are weak are not required to repay anything. But you have nothing to lose. Whatever works for others works for them as they wish. Therefore, a person is neither afraid nor embarrassed to live in that society. Even if he cannot do things equally with others, he lives with everyone without losing anything by relying on his education and good personality. Because when you correct others, theirs will also be corrected. When I work on other people's houses, I work on theirs. When I collect the grain of others, theirs is also collected, so they will live in peace with the community until the end of their lives without fearing anything. This good practice has now remained at an entirely feasible level. A culture that has been favored and envied for years is now history and the record is closed. It is said that instead of him, what I have observed is that if a person builds a poor house or collects grain with 10 people, they will be charged according to the amount paid to a day laborer in the city. This means that a person who cannot pay money will not do anything. Because of that, it is becoming common to see people who have no means leave their surroundings and migrate to the country they know, in search of relatives. When I was a child, I grew up with my grandfather in the countryside. A rural person wakes up early in the morning and does everything for us. In rural areas, it is okay to sleep in the morning. Because there is no such thing as lunch in the village, everyone gets up early in the morning and cooks, eats and drinks, and goes to work. This is common in all local communities. When they cook their food, when they make coffee, smoke is bound to appear in everyone's house. Since it is mostly a thatched house, it is common for smoke to be seen in the distance. With that sign, it is ensured that all the people in the area have a peaceful night. If it happens that there is no smoke in a person's house in the morning, a person will be sent to the house where there is no smoke to make sure that they have a peaceful night. It is known if the place is old. When I think about it now, even if it is impossible to reclaim that culture as a golden culture, nothing can stop us from remembering it. All the good things that existed in those days have now disappeared under the pretext of civilization. The main reason for this is because of being yours. Just as urbanization is useful for many things, it has made us lose many important things. Of course, the problem is not only caused by urbanization, but it is a problem that comes from abandoning one's own things and looking for human things. Human things always mean human culture and human clothing, so neglecting one's own better things has become widespread. Both modern education and urbanism need to be used properly. It is not appropriate to use both of them in a way that harms us. If you can be yourself, everything can be fixed. Although it is not completely possible to bring back the past, it is possible to replace lost things with other useful things instead of clinging to useless things. This kind of problem is more prominent in the rural areas, but it is also observed in the cities. For example, the first time I saw women's pants was in a hotel in the 1990s. In those days, women working as prostitutes in hotels only wore clothes to attract customers. When we look at it today, it is not only the label of a prostitute, but it seems to be the garment of honor for every woman. The main reason for raising this issue is that some of us rush to use the things we use without knowing the origin and why they came from outside. And this is to keep us warm while exposing us to important social losses. At some point, a young man here in Addis Ababa wore a shirt with Chinese writing on it. When I moved, a Chinese woman looked at him and laughed a lot. Everyone I was watching started laughing with her. It is not easy for a people who are obsessed with considering everything from outside as sacred, but because of their abundance, everyone sees them and follows the crowd, whether they like it or not. As you mentioned before, many women don't know about the history of tight pants, but they use them because of seeing their peers. Many people use other things not by knowing but by seeing others. If every person starts to be himself, he will make a rational decision about everything. Instead of just following people, he will not try to imagine everything he sees and what is presented to him. Each person has their own unique identity. Unless the difference is whether to use it or not to use it, it is not useful to stick to the useless culture and identity of a foreign country when there are national identities that are useful as individuals and as a society. I want it to be clear that I am not saying that everything that comes from outside is not useful. In the same way, when we look at ideas and products that are not useful and are better than what we have and come from outside, it seems that we are at odds with ourselves. Basically, something that should be taken from another world is better not to be taken, unless it is to fill a missing place. Because no one loves you more than yourself, it is not a bad thing to be superior to yourself. The worst thing is to forget what is important to you in pursuit of useless things that are not yours. There are many things that need to be corrected, especially in cities. For example, the difference in the level of domestic production and foreign production is not based on a correct perspective. By my nature, I like local products, especially when it comes to shoes. Why don't I try like the others? He bought a very beautiful pair of outdoor shoes for 3,000 bear, and at the same time he bought a pair of domestic lion shoes for 600 bear. The outsole started to crumble at the bottom. Although I don't think that it is completely unnecessary, I want to say that it should be a local product that should be given more attention. Trying to leave it completely is considered to be alienated from the world community, so it is recommended to accept it and not accept it with a reason. Sometimes, the reason why foreign products are chosen in large quantities may be because their prices are lower, but I do not believe that it is appropriate to put pressure on domestic products to be produced in large quantities and their prices are reasonable, but to feed people's own good things and collect people's inferior things. It is not appropriate that all the products that have maintained their standard due to foreign exchange should be exported and the remaining products should be sold domestically. If not, by increasing the quantity and quality of the product, it is possible to provide quality products to all incomers by avoiding the so-called ordinary products. When it comes to being you, I often argue with people that most people want to look like other people instead of being themselves. Children are not allowed to grow up like their own children. In this situation, situations where husbands and wives often clash. Because one of the two insists on other people's behavior or identity, the other says no. Loving and respecting human things more than anything else is the biggest problem of our country. For example, if we take the upbringing culture of our country's children, there are those who testify that the old one is better in many ways, and those who argue that the old one is bad will not disappear. The problem of many people is that they are obsessed with following a lot of voices, so it is undeniable that there are a lot of people who are close to what they don't allow in order to get closer to what is good in their mind. Although everyone wants good things, self-denial in pursuit of good things is not recommended at all. It is possible to take good things from others and not leave your own good things. One should go in search of others to fill what is missing, not to sink oneself. Strive for the greater good of both, not to pull them to one side. Because in this day and age, the political philosophy itself has given up on being pulled to one side and has said goodbye if it chooses to be in the middle ground. It is not a question of how society should be more central. Anyone has the right to choose what is right without being forced by anyone, so we should not follow the majority, but take responsibility for choosing what makes sense. At that time, it is possible to increase the responsible generation. A child who has always been told that our things are backward and our things are bad can reach a certain point and be humble enough to accept that our things are good. A couple of days when I was going to buy spare parts, I noticed that they try to sell domestic products at foreign prices. I was able to observe how much self-doubt is in the mind of the businessmen. It is known that shoes and jeans produced in our country are sold as made in Turkey. Once you heard in the media that the jeans produced by Haisa arrived abroad and were sold under a new name. Leica would go abroad to change the packaging and return with the title of Med. Nothing would be added to it. This kind of approach will not only make the country not proud of the country's production, but also play a negative role in instilling in people's minds that everything that belongs to one's own is bad. If there is one other thing, when I compare the Turkish movie translated in Amharic and the house drama, it cannot be denied that the house drama is entertaining and educational in many ways. But many people watch those movies whose purpose is not clearly known. Because the white man in the movie is speaking in Amharic, not because the content is nonsense. Even worse, some people are able to listen to the good music of the country, and it is easier to watch the fights of the white people in English. It is possible to guess which one is better than fighting and singing. It is not appropriate to give more space to human things than it deserves and to deny it the rightful place just because it is one's own. Everything is good in moderation. It is not necessary to destroy things and bring out more good things from the middle. Throwing away is only good for sports elephants. It is not a good thing to throw away culture, faith, and good habits. While this title encourages self-love, it does not encourage giving up other valuable things. Because there is nothing on this earth that is useful on its own, but when one is combined with the other to give more good, there is nothing good or bad on its own. One of the most dangerous things is classification. Once classification starts, there is no stopping it. Continuing to say something is good and saying it is bad does not bring balance. Instead, it puts things in perspective. Therefore, it is important to be careful not to classify things too quickly. There is no citizen who denigrates his own things. Instead of doing the same, he exalts himself. It is known that a large number of Chinese people work in our country, which can be an example of this. When they go to buy something from a market center, they give priority to their country's products. They use other countries' products only where their country's products are available. When asked why, they say that it is to express their patriotism. Our country's shoe factory workers do not make shoes that they have produced themselves. They export their own pure leather products and use other countries' non-leather products. This situation may be due to two reasons. The first one stems from not wanting one's own product and not having confidence in one's own things, and the second reason indicates not buying it regardless of the price. They bring it from overseas and sell it to us at a cheap price, and ours demand more than what we deserve when nothing is imported. The reason for this is also known, which is due to insufficient production and the presence of sufficient supply and sufficient manpower. It can be started from two things. The first is greed, which wants to work a little and get more benefits, and the second is lack of self-confidence. Both are not acceptable from a healthy point of view. Because the central attraction is based on the pursuit of self-interest and not on providing services to the citizens, people can't be satisfied just because they earn more. Sometimes there is satisfaction in giving too much service. As it is known, there are two types of assets, namely tangible and intangible assets. Tangible refers to any quantifiable and tangible property, while intangible refers to intangible and intangible resources. For example, a customer of a land service provider is an intangible asset, and the money the customer brings is a tangible asset. Both are edible. But in our country, the actual situation gives importance only to the property that is counted. No merchant remembers the incalculable wealth and gives it its proper place. For example, if we look at some restaurants, there are those that seem to be open only during land time. It means in their hospitality. There are a lot of procedures that make people who like to offend the user with their food quality and price. Once they go and call the person who used it, and secondly on the spot, they do not want to sell it. Merchants who follow such a situation always expect only new users who are not angry. Once someone has tasted it, they know it won't go back to them. Such a situation also opens the door to the creation of an unstable business, and it leads to a tendency to change the business sector quickly, and such an approach has its own problems. One of the problems is always looking for a new client, which causes a loss of credibility and can go and do everything outside of the business world. It should be understood that being oneself does not mean isolation from the rest of the world. Being yourself means taking advantage of important things from others, gaining experience, and sharing knowledge, and production will be more beneficial. I should emphasize that being yourself means that the main focus is the motivation to make a balanced decision, and it does not mean abandoning everything from the other side. To see what it means to make a balanced decision, it is like breaking away from blind categorization, as we try to rise a little above. Blind judgment means coming to a conclusion that there is no need for what is called mine and that it is not good if it is not only theirs. In connection with this, I was not comfortable with the way in which a Tawaki individual spoke about our country's tap water on the Tawaki media. The way he described it is a kind of aqua that makes us doubt everything that is ours. He heard them say, "I have never drunk our country's tap water because it has too many calories. Because there is a lot of chlorine, there is a need for correction, but deciding not to drink it while it is good is a kind of approach that leads to classification. Because I don't think it's important to think that once chlorinated water is always that way. Things are always getting better, so it's good to keep in mind that even once chlorinated tap water can be fixed at another time." Since the tap water may be fixed at some point, the reason why I said that it is necessary to be careful of blind classification is because blind classification habits are something that hinders both producers and consumers and also eats up the country's image. That's probably why Haisa brought the jeans produced here to a certain country, changed the name and sold them to us at low prices. It is not appropriate to condemn them for why she did this. Because the problem of society's old attitude is that it is difficult for them to fix it, even if it involves additional costs, it is not surprising that they want to sell their products. Rather than their approach, it is the society's blind attitude that should be criticized. In this book, I bought Made in Ethiopia from Natera and took a rebuke from my friend. Many people believe in the philosophy of following the masses and not encouraging decision-making based on reason. Therefore, if the majority is wrong, it is considered righteous, and if the few follow the right thing, it is considered as condemnation. Being you involves being guided by inner compulsion. Inner compulsion means deciding something based on one's own needs and feelings without any voice coming from elsewhere. One of the things that help to maintain a proper balance in the land thing is to be guided by one's own feelings and do what one wants to do based on that. I have no problem accepting responsibility at this time. It is not difficult for every person to take responsibility for something he has decided on his own time. Even if he has a good result or a bad result, the decision is his own, so he can take responsibility without having to be persuaded by anyone. When I follow social media, when I hear comments about our country's politics, I see people gather and criticize why government officials, including the Prime Minister, have not implemented their ideas. A person who has taken responsibility should follow his own important ideas and not accept everyone's ideas. Because a responsible person decides what to do, not him, and it is not appropriate to think or wait for other people to do what they have decided for him. Maybe a person who is not happy with what he is doing should take the time to fix what he wants to fix if he gets the chance. It is not acceptable to want other people to do his bidding. It is not necessary to focus on the act of divisiveness and pulling or pushing to a group just because the person himself had the opportunity to write and say something that even Landminute does not want to take responsibility for. It is not the person who should take responsibility for the idea that an individual or group brings, but it is the person who should take responsibility for it. It does not indicate balance. Thinking something else inside and saying something else with your mouth is a trick. It is not only other people who perform such a practice. A person who is used to deception, not only himself, first deceives himself, and then gradually begins to deceive others. How can he convince others if he didn't convince himself? In order to convince others, it is necessary to convince yourself, so it is important to convince yourself first. Therefore, both those who lie and those who tell the truth begin to lie or trust people only after they have lied to themselves or fed the truth to themselves. Being yourself does not necessarily mean pretending to be good, but being able to reflect that, whether good or bad. That's when it becomes easier to correct and correct. When a person begins to be himself, he defends himself even if it is inappropriate deception. Improper deception is an immoral activity that is done to please or displease a third party by leaving aside the real thing. For example, trying to use a food or drink in it can be to refrain from using it so that another person does not get angry or look at it. To use alone and secretly when there is no one to be afraid of. And in this case, self-delusion means doing it as it is. But deception is often associated with deceiving other people. Regarding self-deception, I remember when I was in the Ministry of Defense I had two friends who liked to smoke cigars. They both shared a room, but neither wanted to be known as a smoker. They are hiding from each other, but they leave each other smoking. Since I was close to both of them, they didn't hide me, so we found one of them smoking, and when I asked him how he smokes while Auntie was in a band room with Akil, he said, "Leave it alone, he smokes me secretly, we are the same." What I could observe from this situation is that both people have the compulsion inside them to smoke cigarettes, but they are deceiving themselves in their efforts to avoid being recognized. They only reveal what they want to show to other people while hiding what they want inside. This condition leads them to practice hypocrisy against their will. Often hypocrisy is highlighted in the religious environment. It is noticed that when people are in their homes, they try to show their behavior that they don't have, even if it's difficult, because they want to be like the crowd, not because that's who they really are. Sometimes they teach other people to do things that they themselves do not touch when they pass by on the street. Once a religious teacher said on the platform, "If you have two, give one to the needy." They sat down and listened to the teacher's words. When I asked the teacher, "Where did my clothes go?" the teacher replied, "I heard you teach that in the past. If you have two clothes, give one to a needy person." I took some of the clothes and gave them to the needy people. Alu is said. It can be understood from this situation that many people want other people to do what they themselves would not try. It is not difficult to find people who are teaching that smoking kills. To convince people, it is important to show them doing the right thing instead of just saying the right thing. While saying good things is good, showing good things is even better. People may try to hide their true identity for a while, but no one can keep it hidden forever. People can only hide their true identity until they are forced to do so. At some point, their hidden true selves will inevitably reveal themselves. Once there was a camp where many wounded soldiers were recuperating, and some soldiers who had recovered from their wounds and were fit for work remained stuck to their wheelchairs for want of rest. They jumped the fence and started running and escaping. What can be understood from this situation is that people can do nothing if they don't want to, and they can do everything if they want to. No one should belittle or denigrate others in order to love himself. Most of the time, the voices of people who participate in politics during the election season end up highlighting the weaknesses of other rival groups instead of emphasizing their own points. Such a situation is not because it highlights their own competence and purpose, but because they are trying to gain an opportunity by using the weakness of others. And this is useful, except perhaps to lose. It does not help the electorate to distinguish the right choice from the point of view of superiority. Talking about people's laziness does not justify our arrogance. What proves our pride is what we actually say about ourselves and what we show in practice. Being yourself is not only disparaging what other people do, but also being accepted by doing what is appropriate for yourself. Our society is very hesitant to accept and trust something of its own choosing, and if it is from another area or overseas, it rushes to accept it without investigating. This is one of the most useless habits. For example, it is known that the so-called political philosophy or philosophy of our country was mostly imported from foreign countries. But when an important idea comes from the country of origin, he is not ready to accept it even though he knows it is important. It is because of lack of self-confidence. It is known that in the past 3 or 4 years, since the addition of our Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, books on politics have been published in the market. It can be said that, surprisingly, it got the most appropriate coverage by the government media and the party members, but not by other media and private media. The reason for this is that the content of the book is known to be very clear and useful, but it is sad to say that it did not create a favorable environment to be received by many because it did not come from abroad. The basic reasons are also known, which is that our society has a very low desire to respect and accept something that is its own, so I have no doubt that it misses many important things. It's just that the situation is different at the individual level as well as at the country level. If we look at the individual level, there is not much room for an important idea that comes from the owner of the house. It is a public secret that we have an obsession with spreading information that we do not know the source of, instead of accepting the actual facts. This is why the spreaders of false reports flood many people with rumors in a short period of time. It is not only the reporters who should take responsibility for the false report and its consequences, but also the listeners. This is because many people do not want to listen to the reports from the regular media, which are supported by a lot of information. This situation is something that the human ear wants to hear. Terrifying watchman, whether or not I hear rumors, it's too late to chase things that don't make sense. This is why even the mainstream media started presenting their reports by focusing only on the things that people want to hear. It is not appropriate to spoil the big picture by presenting a report that focuses on a certain group, but it can be considered as an alternative that contains important ideas for the country's politics, which is useful for all citizens to listen to. It is believed that a society defeated by hypocrisy and hypocrisy is difficult to selectively listen and selectively accept. Therefore, the media should not go to them, but encourage them to come to the media in different ways. The main thing is to follow the crowd. It is not fair to conclude that something is right or wrong just because many have followed it and a good few have not. Everyone should have a position that says it is right or wrong according to their own point of view. To do that, you need to be yourself. A person who is not himself always respects the choice of the crowd and never has his own choice. In an environment where there is no self-selection, neither balance nor rationality can exist. People can take proper responsibility for their own decisions, not by following the crowd, but only when they are able to support their own position with reason. Although the effort to be you is not accepted by many people, the main thing is to be yourself, not to get the approval of the masses. A person who struggles to be he is bound to deal with a lot of criticism for a while, so it is a very supportive position not to give room for criticism, but to always do what he believes to be right. Many of us want to be ourselves, but we can't be. Although doing so is expected for the time being, it is not appropriate for our own happiness to come in order to make people happy all the time. The mistake of all mistakes is the act of making everyone happy. A person who tries to please everyone will spend his whole life in vain without being able to please the people and himself. There is no one on this earth who can always please people completely, so we have to stand our ground as much as we can and allow things to continue in their balance. Self-being wisely, there is an occasional tendency to be self-conscious among many, but they are marginalized and pushed away by the society because it is not common in the society to be oneself but to follow the crowd. When a person who tries to be he is found, he is less accepted. In order to maintain that balance, it is necessary to be clever. One day, showing unusual behavior to the society can bring its own problems, so it is necessary to be careful. We can live with people and be ourselves in a way that does not affect our social participation. Avoiding unnecessary chaos by agreeing only on important things, and trying to create a positive impact if possible, it is not recommended to be completely self-absorbed. It is possible to inculcate our own good attitude and self-worth in society, not by isolating oneself from the society, but by being able to be in the society. In the past, when the foreigner came to our country for different missions, this was also the way they did it. They entered into the community without being far away from the community and gradually changed to their own habits after experiencing the culture and lifestyle of the community. If they can do that when their number is small and their skin color is different from the people of the country, how can the people of the country not easily practice the good things to the masses? The main thing is to change you, but people can be changed in many ways. Since society is inherently innovative, it will not be difficult to get used to new ideas even for a while. The problem is that when something else happens, be it useful or not, it will inevitably show the tendency to accept it and make it one's own. The only way to reduce this practice is to train people to find a compelling reason for everything they do. For example, the practice of seeing a neighbor and doing what the neighbor did is not encouraged, that it is not good to buy things that many people buy just because people buy them without interest. We have to see and record something and evaluate it from the point of view of its advantages and disadvantages. How do I protect my belongings? It is common to see two types of things standing on the edge. One side believes that if it is only mine, the other side does not need everything, and the other side believes that everything that is mine is not right, and everything that belongs to other people is right. The desire to be oneself is not cooperating with either group and being able to combine things that are considered important from both and use them for one's own needs. Getting something useful from both of them means that we can get good things from both of them, from ourselves and others, without the need to push them all away. This means that it shows us that it is possible to get useful things from others, and trying to use them by combining them with our own useful things, instead of trying to get away from one to the other, we can lose the benefits that we should have received from both. Therefore, the question of how to protect my things is answered in this way, not by leaving one and hanging on the other. It should be well known that there is no permanent good or permanent bad in this world. If it is necessary to choose one of the two, there is no need to make the choice permanent and unchangeable. It is important to understand that things need to be looked at in a balanced way, as it is not recommended to stick to just one choice, as we are in an era where rapid change is very much accepted. When we are preparing for everything, our thinking should be focused on the benefits we get from things, not following the needs of the masses and doing what many have done. Trying to make it our own without understanding it sets back our desire to be ourselves. It is important to be careful not to do so. Because people do not have the power to think and decide for themselves, following others and always repeating what people have done will lead to failure. It is very important to think separately because there is no body that benefit from being attached. Chapter 4. Your Identity Acceptance. Whether a person wants it or not, it is inevitable that he will be with himself. However, living with you is not about fully accepting yourself. A person lives with himself for centuries without accepting himself. There are many indications that living with oneself does not mean accepting oneself. Among them, it includes living a life of your own while wishing to be like other people. But living that way is not self-acceptance. Self-acceptance means being able to accept yourself without flaws. Blemishes include things that people have given us and what we have given ourselves. Accepting yourself is not the identity that people give us, but the identity that we believe we are. People sometimes choose a name that we don't want and want to call us by that name. And because of the number of repetitions, we accept that name that is not ours and make it our own. The name may also contain a derogatory insult. At first, we try not to accept the name because of its abomination, but after some time, we think that it is our own, and when they call us by that name, we say sorry. But we hate his name. However, accepting yourself or your identity should be a label that you like to be called and are willing to accept. Although our first name is given to us from our childhood by our parents or guardians, we may or may not be like our name. For example, many people name their children Million to express their desire for wealth. But they don't see themselves becoming millionaires following their son's name. Parents or guardians choose names that are convenient for themselves and do not care much about the convenience of their child. However, it is inevitable to be called by that name. As is the case with promotion, there is also a change of name. This conversion comes from not liking that name and not wanting to be called by it. If it is possible to change the names given by the parents, how can it be easy to not accept the names given to us by people without our will? It is important to realize that accepting identity does not mean accepting the names people have given us without our consent. Accepting identity means the identity we have given ourselves. If we are willing to be called by the identity people give us, it is important to know that we are fulfilling their needs, not our own. It is important to understand that when a person is created, they are free to make their own choices. Therefore, we should understand that it is our right not to accept the identity that others give us without our needs. Just like when parents or guardians name their own needs, when they name others, they keep their own needs in mind. Even if we have to call them by the names they call us when we are not ready to accept or reject them, we have the right to refuse the name after we have reached a decision. Rejecting what we don't want can be part of our efforts to accept ourselves. Because self-acceptance means giving oneself the label one believes in, excluding the labels other people carry. When a person is able to do this, it means that he is ready to accept himself as he is, no matter what. If a person wants to change or improve himself, he must first know his current situation and take the necessary corrective action on it. A person who does not know where he is not ready to change himself or accept change. In order to accept the new identity, it is necessary to properly understand what the old identity was. If not, it's probably because the situation he was in doesn't need any change. Before accepting the new identity, it is important to check the identity that was held. The biggest reason to use this ZDE is because it helps us not to throw away our existing good things just because they are refreshing things. The identity we want may not be found in what people have given us before, but in what comes to us as a new one. If not, we can allow ourselves to be who we love to be. Accepting who you are means first of all accepting the identity that you carry without any hesitation. After that, if it suits the identity you carry, it means to continue with it, and if it doesn't suit, accept it. If it is necessary to serve both choices, it is necessary to separate the previous one in style. This means that if there is something that we have brought to ourselves through practice that we don't want, we need to throw it away after we have confirmed that it is not ours. It is accepting the identity itself, not being the bearer. In general, when we accept our own identity, we accept the identity of others as they agree. In many places, it can be said that not calling people by the identity they want is a source of conflict. Especially if we don't know the meaning of the labels people give us, it complicates the matter. This identity cannot be a name given alone. It is related to something, but it is related to our character, our profession, our appearance, our language, our culture. The identity we choose for ourselves is not only suitable for people, but it is enough if it suits us as long as it does not affect people's interests and dignity. When that is the case, we can walk the path we choose and build our true selves. It means that we are called by the identity that people randomly give us when we have come to the conclusion that we have not been able to build a true identity for ourselves. After we build our identity through our choices, we can force people to call us by that identity. People give us an identity only if we don't have the identity we gave ourselves. When we have a true identity, no one can burden us with an additional identity. Maybe if he can, it's a title, but he can't give us a name that we don't like. When I say accept your identity, it does not mean accepting a burden given to us by somebody, but it means preparing an identity for ourselves that suits us. Our identity is not only limited by name, but we should have an identity that is visible and tangible. This so-called visible and tangible identity should be revealed by work, not just by name. Our work should be our identity, our behavior should be our identity, our profession should be our identity, our communication should be our identity, and our love should be our identity. It is our right not to accept the accounts given to us by people outside of this. Even if something is beneficial, if the receiver does not agree to it, nothing will be enforced by the decision of the giver. If we do not agree to accept what is given to us, it cannot be ours. Therefore, it is necessary to work hard to have a strong identity in order not to be trash of others. That's when we can make a name for ourselves. This is not a name we call ourselves, but we can have an identity written in gold. By knowing where we are. Identifying our goal, it is believed that we can give ourselves our own identity by setting a clear goal for ourselves, and it is also certain that our identity is not given to us by people, but by us who give it to us. If we allow ourselves to be called by what people give us, then the responsibility will be ours, not the people. Therefore, it is important to understand that it is our choice to beautify or spoil our name, that is, to keep it as it is. This label is one name. If our name represents who we are, it is our duty to beautify our name. It is not uncommon to put a name on top of something that others can name. If we don't want people to give us a name that we don't want, it is necessary to beautify our name first. Accepting your identity does not mean that you carry the identity that people give you, but it is like customizing an adjusted identity for yourself. When I say this, I don't mean to reject the identity that we got by nature, but to be able to adjust the identity that is given to us by human beings in our own time. Natural identity does not mean that we are created as a woman to become a woman, but it is the identity that is given to us by the people around us after we are born. It is known that the process exists in the world, although the idea of the book is not about changing the so-called natural identity. The idea that he wanted to convey in the book is to convey the idea that it is possible not to call people by the labels they give us without our consent. This can be done not by being nameless, but by preparing a suitable name for ourselves accompanied by practical work. This acceptance of yourself or who you are is not only deciding not to agree with the labels people give us, but also not trying to make other labels for yourself. In the passage listed above, it is about the description that people give us, but it does not refer to our attempts to take it from people. However, many of us, whether consciously or unconsciously, tend to make our own labels given to us by others. But others' account cannot be our account, so we can adjust our choice. Just because someone has a good reputation, wanting to be called by that name may not mean we will be like them. Maybe we can learn a lot from that person. But beyond that, we cannot be him. No matter how much we imitate him, we cannot be like him. Therefore, it means that we should be able to return the person's identity to the owner in time and underline our own identity. Using people as models can be a starting point for a while, but it cannot sustain us permanently. Because things grow and die, therefore, when the person we modeled dies, we will not die together. Therefore, it is necessary to prepare our own identity in our own water, in our own choice, in our own line, and accept it as our identity. Major fatness owner to be, your fat and works are named by people. Being a fat man is something that requires passion and hard work. Many people may be involved in this fattening. It is mainly done by the owner, but a few people may be involved. For example, family, our first-level leaders, our peers, our religious institution, our fat and work will have a contribution in some way. This is for the fat that grows with us from the beginning and does not apply to the fat that we bring by our choice. Owning fat is the kind of fat that we have inherited from people on various occasions, and we can not only grow it, but we can grow the fat that is important and best for us by our own choice, so that we can have the fat that we like in any situation. What we call our fat or manufactured fat means our fat that we have chosen for ourselves and the kind of water we like. Trans fats are defined in many different ways. To see some of them, it can be seen in social life, professional conduct, personal life principle and in various situations, and it is not possible to hide this situation. Just as it is possible to harm the environment with your unprocessed fat, it is possible to benefit the environment with your saturated fat. Even if a fat man has no desire to do anything on his own time, people can learn a lot from him by watching what he does for himself. People will be happy to have such a person in their neighborhood. Because the children who grow up with that person as an example may have good behavior in a certain way, and it is bound to be confirmed by their indirect benefit. If the customs of the society in such a situation are good, it is believed that a child who grows up in that environment will grow up with good manners. In that situation, the role of individuals will not be easy. Because as mentioned earlier, children are not born with anything when they are born, so they grow up making everything their own in the process of growing up. Good manners can be learned through practice. Just as good things are passed down from person to person, so-called good things get married. But it requires desire, because without desire, there is no marriage of one thing to another, so it is important to show interest in what we want to come to us. People who have been confined to one place for centuries will always have their behavior dependent on that environment. Then, when you see different situations, it becomes difficult for her to accept. What you see is important, but it takes time for her to be ready to accept it. Therefore, moving from one place